There's narrow neck of land, small neck of land, narrow pass, narrow passage, lake line bountiful, line desolation, line fortified, headwaters of head river Sidon. So all of these things are different geographical locations within the Book of Mormon geography.
Okay, folks, welcome back to the program. Many of you know my guest. Well, I had him on, what, was that like 3 months ago?
A month.
2 months ago? A month ago? It was only a month ago? He came on.
It was 2 months.
Okay. Because right after that was the Firm Conference.
Right.
And those of you who have ever attended the Firm Conference, I haven't yet, but I'm going this October if I'm a good boy. Hopefully I'm a good boy until August. No, I'm playing.
You're still on our good list. You're on.
That's what I mean. But in October, and I'm looking forward to that. I'm on a diet, by the way. I'm going to look sharp, and I'm getting my dental work done. And so I'll be speaking there. I think I have an idea of what I'm going to be speaking about too. About other sheep I have, which are not of this fold. I've been doing a little ditty there on the YouTube and the podcast. But Ryan, what exactly do you do with the Firm Conference anyway?
I am the events coordinator for this will be our 34th conference. We do 2 every year.
Okay.
So I organize them and invite people and set up schedules and make sure the tables are done and we get the tickets done and we just do all the organization for the event. Kind of like a seminar director almost. And then I do a daily podcast and I do 5 or 6 social media posts every day and just help Rod with Meldrum with whatever he needs to do as far as this goes. So I love it. It's a lot of fun. I get to share the gospel every day.
That's good. And I've had Rod on. I had you on talking about the Jaredites. Very lengthy video, but you guys got to go check it out. It's amazing, chock full of information. We're talking data. We're not talking to just, theories, but actual data where Ryan shows you how people sailed in those days and the trade winds and the currents and things like that, and maybe possibly how the Jaredites landed here in America. But go watch that video. I'll leave the link to that. Anyway, Ryan, welcome back. What are we talking about today?
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Well, I thought I would talk about where is the narrow neck of land of the Book of Mormon. And there is so much information. I know we've heard about the narrow neck of land all of our life, but I want to share with you in a heartland perspective where I feel it happened in the United States of America.
Okay, because the narrow neck of land, what I have learned from Jonathan and Rod and you and others, is that can mean many different things, right?
Yeah, there's probably 10 references I'll give you real quick. There's actually 3 different Book of Mormon scriptures that talk about necks. And I'm going to tell you which neck is which neck, and they're all in different locations.
Awesome. Let's get started.
Okay, love to. So that's the title, is Where is the Narrow Neck of Land? This shows you the United States of America. You'll see in the yellow, above the Ohio and Missouri River, north of there, is the land of the Nephites, and below in the green is the land of the Lamanites. And at the very bottom, at the bottom of the Mississippi River in the Gulf, is the area where Lehi landed, probably close to the Apalachicola River down there in Florida. And the Nephites traveled up until they got into the northern area of that land. So the thing I believe is if you look on the left, it says the Book of Mormon is the Word of God and a real history of a real people. I emphasize that because a lot of people today say it's fantasy or it was made up or we don't know where it was. No, but the things that we emphasize is number one, the hill Cumorah is only in Manchester, New York. The plains of the Nephites are in Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. Zelf's Mound is in Valley City, Illinois. Zarahemla, the city, is in Montrose, Iowa. The Garden of Eden is in Independence, Missouri. The New Jerusalem is in Independence, Missouri. And the Adam-on-Diamond, of course, is in Daviess County, Missouri. And Manti is probably located in Randolph, Huntsville, Missouri. So those are things we know. And if you want to see all of these slides again, just look at the bottom where it says bookofmormonevidence.org/next. And you can review the slides I share with you, Troy.
Nice. Yeah, and we can leave that link. Remind me to leave that link in the description section. Can I ask a couple questions?
Sure.
Is this what most Heartlanders agree that geographically the Book of Mormon took place just like this?
Yes.
Are there more than one model?
Yeah, there's two or three different opinions. For example, of where the Mulekites came in, or where the Jaredites came in, or different locations of certain little cities or areas. So yeah, there's a little variation, but this is an overall 95% view of what most Heartlanders believe.
Okay. Thank you so much. I was always kind of curious about that.
Yeah. So what I want people to know is that if you'll follow the old Hopewell Native American culture, and it's called Hopewell because a guy named Mordecai Hopewell, they found the first mound in Ohio on his property. And that's why they're called the Hopewell. But this is history. This is not LDS information. In history, if you just type in Hopewell culture, you'll see a map on the left that looks like this, that you'll see the Hopewells began at 600 BC. They went up into Tennessee in 500 BC, up into Missouri and above in 300 and 200 BC, over to Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio, 100 BC to 200 AD, and then they ended in New York at 400 AD. That is history speaking, not the church. History says that in 400 AD, the Hopewell went away for some reason. They don't know why, but they went away. Well, that fits right in to we believe that Hopewell culture are the Nephites. Because if you look on my map on the right, it follows that same projection basically right up into New York. So we're excited about sharing this information with people that comes from history, not from our minds. Now, also one thing is in 1894, a surveyor or an archaeologist named Cyrus Thomas, he did some surveys and discovered, and you see all the little red dots on this map? Those are all not a mound, but they're a site, a Hopewell site, meaning there could be 20, 30 mounds within that site. And this gentleman has a quote named Gregory Little, and this is a really good quote. He says that over 1 million mounds once existed, and perhaps 10,000 still exist. So there are archaeological sites all over, especially the eastern United States, with all these red dots. And I've kind of put a circle around it to show you what I believe is the basic land Zarahemla, Bountiful, and land Lehi Nephi.
That's interesting.
So these are the 4 questions I will answer in this event or in this podcast. Number 1, now let me go back. Why does the Book of Mormon matter is number 3, and that's an important one. But for some reason I can't see this slide.
You have the map of the world.
Yeah.
And you've got New Jerusalem, Canaan, Jerusalem, and Canaan.
Yeah, but above that, doesn't it say the 4 questions?
Yeah. Where is, you want me to
I
read
can't
them?
read it. I
Okay.
can't read it.
Number
That's
one
something.
is, where is the promised chosen land of the Book of Mormon?
Right.
Number, you want me to keep reading?
Yeah.
Number two is, where is the hill Cumorah, where
Yeah.
the
And
last
I can
battles
see
occurred?
3 and 4. I don't know how to get rid of my board on top.
It's okay.
Number 3 is why does the Book of Mormon geography matter? And number 4 is where is the narrow neck of land? So, number 1, where is the promised land? Well, there are 2 promised lands. If you read in Moses chapter 6 and 17, this will tell you where the first ever promised land was. It says, and Enos lived 90 years and begat Canaan. Notice the spelling. And Enos and the residue of the people of God came out from the land, which was called Shulon, and dwelt in a land of promise, which he called after his own son, whom he had named Canaan. Notice the spelling. So the first land was over there in North American hemisphere, but the lands were together. There was no Atlantic Ocean. Okay. And so if you look at Canaan as Jerusalem, spelled Canaan, you see Canaan, Cainan, is the new Jerusalem. And a lot of people don't realize that. Let me share this about the promised land. If you look at Ether 13, verse 2 to 3, I'm only going to read the red parts, which I think you'll really like. Ether 13:12, it says, after the waters had receded from off the face of this land, it became a choice land above all other lands, a chosen land of the Lord. It was the place of the new Jerusalem. So what does that mean? That Ether is saying New Jerusalem, we know, is in Missouri. Well, we know that's the chosen land of the Lord. And this is scripture. It's not somewhere in Guatemala or in Russia. Now, Gordon B. Hinckley said this: no land is without its beauty, no people without their virtues. But surely this is a good land, a choice land, a chosen land. To me, it is a miracle, a creation of the Almighty. So we're not saying we're better. We're saying the Lord chose this land to be the place of the restoration. And then Elder Monson, or President Monson, when he was a prophet, he said, the last paragraph, the Lord gave a divine promise to the ancient inhabitants of this favored country, the United States. Behold, this is a choice land. This is in his book, Monson, Thomas S. Monson, Teachings of Thomas Monson, 2011. He says, our Heavenly Father inspired the leaders of the United States of America, that there would be a climate where our Heavenly Father could send into this period of mortality a choice spirit. That would be Joseph Smith. So in my opinion, and in my strong opinion, the Book of Mormon is the land in the United States.
What about, I always had the question about Canada. Did it ever go up into Canada?
Well, it's just like Canada is connected, but so is Mesoamerica and South
Right.
America. They're all connected. Some that believe the entire Americas, plural, was the promised land. Well, that would include Greenland, wouldn't it?
Right.
Include
Yeah.
the very bottom tip of South America. Well, it's all land that people weren't aware of, but it's not necessarily the promised land where the Lord chose to establish the restoration.
Right.
You know?
If you look at God as in as far as no coincidences, right? And you have where Joseph Smith was born and reared, then he has the, otherwise why wouldn't he do it in South America? Why didn't the gospel come forth from Mexico or Guatemala?
Everything of importance happened here in this area, the
Right.
Constitution of the United States.
Yeah, it wasn't just Joseph Smith growing up in New York. Cumorah happened to be not too far from his home or where the plates were buried. Nothing was ever said about two Cumorahs, which that's the most preposterous thing I've ever heard in my life. Is the two Cumorah theory. That is somebody reaching out of the air and going, This is why.
Well, and
That's
I can show you a little bit why, but I agree with you. Now, a lot of people too in Mesoamerica, they say the final battle of the Nephites and Lamanites happened somewhere in Mexico, but they believe the hill Cumorah is in New York. But they believe a different hill is in Mesoamerica somewhere, and that Moroni had to take all the plates from Mesoamerica to New York to bury. Well, I don't believe that. I believe the same hill that Joseph buried the plates or found the plates is the same place where the final battles happened. Because look at this. James Talmage says the final struggles between the Nephites and the Jaredites happened in the vicinity of Hill Cumorah in what is now the state of New York. His second paragraph, he says, for many decades, the Nephites retreated before their aggressive foes, making their way northeastward through what is now the United States. About 400 AD, the last great battle was fought near the hill Cumorah, and he hid away the record of his people in the hill Cumorah. That's pretty clear.
yeah. Now, I thought James Talmage was a hemispheric guy.
Well, yeah, and I'll explain hemispheric a little bit. I
Okay.
think a lot of people in the church were hemispheric, which meant the whole Americas from Greenland down South America.
Right.
But they understood later that it just wasn't. I mean, Joseph Smith never believed that. But then my last quote from Joseph Fielding Smith says, some of those battles, and evidently the final battles, did take place within the borders of what is now the United States. The place within the borders, that being true, what would it be more natural than Moroni, like his father Mormon, would deposit the plates in the land where the battles came to an end and the Nephites were destroyed? Final battles took place in the territory known as the United States and in the neighborhood of the Great Lakes and hills of Western New York. That's Joseph Fielding Smith.
Wow.
So it's powerful. Now, there are a few quotes that prophets and apostles have mentioned the hemispheric model or that it could have happened in Mesoamerica, but I've got 300 or 400 that say it happened in the United States. So this is basically in green, that's the land of the heartland of the Book of Mormon, from Zarahemla to Cumorah and down to Lehi Nephi. Lehi Nephi is right around Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Zarahemla is over there by Nauvoo, Illinois. And Zelph's right there in between. So this is what we believe is the heartland of the United States. Now, here's some facts that you'll like. Oliver Cowdery, in his letter that he wrote, Joseph Smith asked him to pen 8 letters or 7 or 8 letters to Wilford Woodruff so people could know the true history. And they penned letters because it cost too much money to print and then send. So they just sent letters back and forth to each other. Well, this one, sent in July of 1835, Oliver Cowdery said, the soil is the first quality of the country and under the state of cultivation, which gives a prospect at once imposing when one reflects on the fact that here, between these hills, the entire power and national strength of both the Jaredites and Nephites was destroyed. Now, what hill is he speaking of there? See the one in yellow that I've highlighted?
Yes.
It's the 2 hills are Cumorah and Shem. Remember, Shem is the first place they put the plates.
Right.
We believe it's right across in that parallel mountain area. And between Cumorah and Shem is a 1-mile wide valley where the final battles happen. Not on the hill Cumorah, but in the 1-mile wide valley. I mean, it'd be easy to put 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 people within a 1-mile area.
Yeah, and we're not talking about, well, don't quote me. I'm asking you, I guess. We're not talking about the type of armies that we would see today. We're talking about a smaller group of people that almost like a family feud between 2 brothers.
Not necessarily. We would see, remember in the end, Moroni talks about gather my you so and so and your 10,000, so and so and your 10,000. I saw them all die. So and so and his 10,000. There was 230,000 that reported dead. And
Okay.
we don't necessarily believe that's right there in the yellow area. It could be the other side of Shem because he had captains reporting to him, Captain, here's how many are dead. Here's how many are dead. And he's saying towards the gathering, towards the east, Cumorah, there was all these bad people killed. And the Lamanites had at least 1 million people that came. So there could have been, 1 or 2 million people in this area. There could have been in the very vicinity of Cumorah, maybe 200,000, in that valley right there, maybe more.
Well, so we know that Joseph never said, I went to go get the plates on Cumorah, right? But then he did. Jonathan Neville found something, I think.
Yeah, we've got several places where
Well, we know for sure there's publications where Oliver Cowdery said Cumorah.
Look in the middle of the paragraph on the right in dark black, it says they were encamped around this hill Cumorah. In this valley fell the remaining strength and pride of the once powerful
right.
This hill Cumorah that he's talking about. And Joseph Smith helped Oliver Cowdery to fill in the blanks of some of this history because Oliver didn't know all this. He had to have Joseph Smith's help in writing the letters.
Interesting.
Now, my personal opinion is here. Why does the Book of Mormon matter? Geography. Well, I know without a doubt, the Book of Mormon is absolutely the truth, and it's by the witness of the Spirit that I know that. But the secondary evidences of knowing that truth is cool as well. And why does it matter? Well, does it matter where the Savior was born?
Right.
Where the biblical events happened? Well, I think it does.
Why do we visit Palmyra? Why do people visit Carthage? Why do people visit Kirtland?
Yeah.
Nauvoo?
Now, is it necessary for us to know Jesus was born in that area for us to have our eternal salvation? No, but we know it. Well, it's the same thing. I know the Book of Mormon happened near the hill Cumorah, and it's not critical for my salvation. It's not one of the temple recommend questions, but I believe it. But do you know in the old world, there are 3 great religions: the Jews, the Muslims, and the Christians. And they all 3 fight over Mount Moriah because that's where Abraham was to sacrifice Isaac. Now, if you've been there and seen Mount Moriah, which I haven't, it's a pretty desolate place. But it's not how desolate it is, it's what's the sanctity of what happened on that mount. So it doesn't have to be beautiful to be important.
Right.
It's a covenant land in Mount Moriah. Well, I think Cumorah is a covenant land as well. I believe that Israel is the promised land forever, and the USA is a promised land forever. But there are Book of Mormon promises or requirements to have a promised land. It has to have a place that is choice above all other lands, that is a land of liberty, where the sacred records are kept. I'm in the second paragraph. Number 5, a land that kept from the knowledge of other nations, and the Gentiles to scatter and afflict the remnant, place where the marvelous work and wonder happened, and a place where there were no kings in the land. So all of those, there's 36 of them on our writings. Rod Meldrum put most of those together. And we believe it's definitely a sacred land where we made covenants. Now, in my 4th paragraph, I say this: if we in the church cannot even decide among ourselves where the Book of Mormon happened, how confusing is that to our youth and to our adults? Think of all the missionaries. When I was on a mission in 1975, I had the Blue Book in Fiji that talked all about Mesoamerica. And I told people that's where it happened. That's what I thought for all my life until I've been looking and studying, and I found out, no, that's not where it happened. I used to believe Mesoamerica, but I don't. So at the last paragraph, I know the brethren of the church take a neutral position on the Book of Mormon geography. All right. And that's fine with me. I don't need them to tell me some of the secondary things about truth. I don't need the prophet to tell me if a monkey became a man. I don't need him to tell me that because I already feel I know it. I don't need him to tell me the age of the earth because I think the scriptures say that Noah was placed about 4000 BC. But I believe the knowledge of the spirit and of the head that are both important in learning the truth. I used to believe in Mesoamerica, but now through prayer and research, I believe the heartland model of the United States. And it's up to you to form your own opinion.
Well, and I just want my audience to know this is so. I find both theories fascinating because I'm trying to keep an open mind. But the more I find out, the more I learn about the words of Joseph, his interactions with Oliver, Oliver's words, and Zelph, and the what was the group that he traveled with? That was the
Anion or
no Joseph when he what?
Oh, Zion's camp.
Zion's camp, and just everything that where Cumorah was. The Constitution is drafted here. This is all the other, even Central and South American countries drafted their constitutions after ours later, as well as Europe.
They once had kings too.
Right. So we never had a king here. We've never had a king.
Some could say that Biden is trying to become a king.
Well, we've
never had one.
There's tyranny now, but
yeah.
But you know what I mean. Yeah. The headquarters of the church would not have thrived anywhere else.
No,
it had to be right here.
The restoration wouldn't have happened anywhere else.
No,
because it had to have enough liberal secularism to allow all people a voice.
Well, okay? and let me finish this real quick. I'll just say this and be quiet, but it's not so much. And people will go, well, what does that have to do with it? Why couldn't it be in Central America? What does our Constitution and freedom of this land have to do with where the Book of Mormon took place? Because the Book of Mormon says it would be in a land that later the land would.
Land of liberty.
They were synonymous in terms, pretty much.
Yeah, they were. And think where the Lord sent the first missionaries to the Lamanites. Doctrine and Covenants 28, 30, and 32. He sent them
to the Lamanites. He didn't say the Native Americans of the United States of America.
And the Lamanites were in Buffalo, New York, Wyandotte, Ohio, and Delaware. The Delaware Indians in Independence, Missouri area.
And I'm going to say something very biased right now that somebody might say that I'm a bigot or a racist, but I'm going to say that the North American Native Americans look more, they just look more Israelite than people do in Central and South America. Sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry if that makes people mad, but it's true.
Well, it's also DNA. There's all Asian DNA up and down the coast of the United States and down into Mexico. It's all Asian. But east of the Mississippi is DNA of the Hebrew Israelites that are the same as the DNA of the Native Americans in eastern United States.
Right.
The question is, where is the narrow neck of land where you're looking at it? Now, a lot of things look a little funky there. Let me explain. You see Lake Ontario in the top right and Lake Erie in the bottom left. Well, what's that big red thing on top that goes from Gregorian Bay all the way over to Syracuse, New York? That's called the Niagara Escarpment. Think of that as a 300-foot high or a 50-foot high or whatever escarpment of stone and rock that is under the water all the way through there. And the Niagara Falls, clear over there where it says 24 miles, that's where the Niagara River starts. And they've cut a fall, the water has cut a fall through that area of the Niagara escarpment down to the Onondaga Formation. Because the big red one on the bottom is called the Onondaga Formation. That's all heavy rock, 30 feet, 50 feet, 100 feet high underneath.
Wow.
Okay?
That's amazing.
And you see in the middle of those two lakes, I show you the old lakes that used to be, were called Lake Tonawanda and Lake Wainfleet. Lake Wainfleet is in Canada. Lake Tonawanda is in the United States. And so that Niagara River, as it dissects and connects Lake Ontario with Lake Erie, is 24 miles wide. And the whole area there is called the Niagara Peninsula. So we believe the Niagara Peninsula is the narrow neck of land.
Well, and didn't George Washington also describe, 17th, 18th, 19th century language? They used that term narrow neck, meaning it could have been going between forests.
Yes, he mentioned.
Or on a Nile in a river was a narrow neck.
Narrow neck and narrow passage has been used in history.
Right.
Abraham Lincoln talked about this very area of Niagara where he claims there were bones and giants that lived there in the ancient Niagara area. But the narrow neck of land is 24 miles wide. But you see my little strip in green in the middle? That's really the narrow neck of land because it was in between Lake Wainfleet and the Onondaga Formation of only 3 miles. And that in green is all land where you could walk between Lake Wainfleet and the Onondaga Formation. And I believe this has nothing to do with Nephites. It had to do with Jaredites. And I'll show you in just a minute. Now, why is it called Niagara? Well, William Bright in Native American place names said Niagara comes from an Iroquoian language. The word means neck. Okay. Also, it meant either straight or neck or bisected land. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
In Wikipedia, a guy named George R. Stewart comes from a name, it means point of land cut in two. And the name Niagara is said to originate from an Iroquois and Onagara, meaning the strait, and also from an Indian word meaning bisected bottomlands. And it also is called also the thunder of water or water cutting through the land. Now, that all explains, I'm going to go back one slide, and you see where the land is cutting through the water. In other words, it's where the seas divide that land, cutting through. Okay, so it becomes a bridge or a Niagara River pass, so to speak. That's what we call the narrow neck of land. Now, did you know there are 3 unique mentions in the Book of Mormon about necks? Number 1 at the bottom left is a narrow neck of land in Ether. Number 2 is a narrow neck in Alma 63. And 1 is small neck of land in Alma 22. They all 3 say neck, but in a very different way. And if you look on the map, number 1 is the one I was just talking to you about. Where you see in green how the land is divided by the water.
Yes.
Okay. Number 2, there's 2 great swamps of extension onto Erie and onto Lake Michigan. And I'll explain that too in a minute. But there were all these 3 narrow necks, narrow neck of lands, or small necks. And did you know there's 12 or 13 others? If you look over to the bottom right, it numbers them 1 through 13. There's narrow neck of land, small neck of land, narrow pass, narrow passage, Lake line Bountiful, line Desolation, line Fortified, headwaters of Head River Sidon. So all of these things are different geographical locations within the Book of Mormon geography. And my next few slides will be about a few of those very specifically so that you can see them, take this information, and go home and study it for yourself without going into a long diatribe.
Nice.
So the first one, after I talked to you briefly about the narrow neck of land, let's now look at the narrow neck. Okay? And the Sea West, meaning Lake Michigan, you see the blue, light blue under the Sea West?
Yes.
That's called the Grand Kankakee Marsh that existed there. It used to be called the Everglades of the North. It's full of water. And if you look at the red line that goes all the way through the middle, you see it starts over the far right, left, and goes all the way up by the Sea West.
Yes.
It's called the St. Lawrence Continental Divide. So anywhere that red line is, water, when it rains, will go either to the north or to the south of that line. So everywhere you look, that continental divide is land. You could walk across the red line because it's where rivers flow different directions from each other at that divide. Then you also see on Lake Erie, the sea south, we recommend it is the Great Black Swamp, which is 40 miles wide and 120 miles long. And it was a oozing of massive water, mud, and snakes, and wolves, and wildcats. It wasn't drained till the 1800s. So in between those two bodies of water, they don't quite touch. You see that?
Yeah.
In my green circle?
Yes.
They don't quite touch. And it's about a 25-mile area that I call the narrow neck, where Hagoth built his ships. So they had land in the narrow neck, built his ships, and then took it right into the Grand Kankakee Marsh and up into Lake Michigan. Or what's even also possible is, let me show you another picture. You see right here where I'm tossing my cursor? That is a narrow neck, just like over here is a narrow neck. This pink is what? The St. Lawrence Continental Divide. This yellow line that goes up is Lake Michigan Basin, where water flows either to the Lake Michigan side or the Lake Erie side. And if you look at the bottom, the orange line, that's the water basin of the Ohio River and the Mississippi River. So those are all areas where people could walk along these lines, and everything else would be water before you get to the good land. But also this narrow neck could be called the line Bountiful, found in 3rd Nephi chapter 3, because Desolation was above the narrow neck, Bountiful was below the narrow neck.
That is amazing. It totally fits like a puzzle.
Yeah, it really is cool.
One of the things that bothers me about the narrow neck of land being in the Meso area, which would be what is that area right there?
It's the Isthmus of Therum.
Yeah, the Isthmus. There we go.
Or Panama.
Is that it's too? What's the word I'm looking for? I mean, it's like
it's too wide and it's too gently.
Right, and and the travel.
Yeah,
was
it's 140 miles.
And didn't it say it took a Nephite how long to travel?
Day and a half, and I haven't even shown you that. That's in North
and
America.
then some will say, well, could have been by horse, but then they don't believe in horses. So I'm sorry.
It's by walking or by boat.
Right. Okay.
So, but now the third one after the narrow neck is the small neck of land. If you look at the bottom, see where my cursor is? It says small neck of land.
Yes, sir.
Okay. That is an area where there's complete land and all water that lands there. You've got the Genesee River going up, flows north into Lake Ontario. You've got Susquehanna that flows down to the Atlantic, and you've got the Allegheny and Ohio that flow into the Gulf of Mexico. You have the mouth of 3 rivers that start in this small neck of land, which was called the Iroquois Forbidden Path in 1760. No white man was allowed in there. It was their protection area. It was the area where they could access 3 rivers and go anywhere they wanted within the United States, pretty much, especially the eastern United States. So you see the narrow neck of land's up here, right? The small neck of land's down here. And you see that which is in yellow? That's the land bountiful, or the land north. And up here in the orange is land desolation. Cumorah was in the land desolation. The land north went up to about the Cazonia, what is it called? The Cazenovia River, okay, which is right here. And then you've got the Cattaraugus River here. But you know, they both have a break in them because the Continental Divide goes right through the two of those.
Interesting.
And that goes down through this. And that Continental Divide goes all the way up to northern United States. But look at the bottom down here in purple, light purple. It's the eastern Continental Divide. There's an eastern, so water goes on this side or on the other side. Whoops, I went ahead too many. It goes over here or over here. So this is a perfect place to have the small neck of land. And if you read in the Book of Mormon over here and what it says, you'll think 2 times, 3 times about it's very possible.
Right.
That small neck of land, let me make it bigger. Okay, so in blue is the small neck of land right here. Over here is the narrow neck of land. Okay, and I believe it's really only this bottom pink area, which is 3 miles wide. See, in the middle is that Onondaga formation, which is under the water, but you can't get through rock. It's below the water right there. Okay, but the small neck of land, you see how the rivers flow? And looking at a 2D map, you'd think the Genesee River flows from Ontario down. No, it doesn't. It flows from right here up to the Ontario. Okay, this flows a little north and then down south on the Allegheny and Ohio. And this goes right into the Atlantic Ocean.
Interesting.
So this to me now, look at what I've got in green right here in the middle. Narrow passage, 1 day for a Nephite. It was 1 day for a Nephite to get in from the land north to the land south. Had nothing to do with the narrow neck of land by itself, but from the narrow neck of land up here, you see this pink line here?
Mm-hmm.
This is a line fortified of 1.5 days or 66 miles to get where? What's down here in orange, Troy?
The land of the land southward, which is Lehi, right. Nephi. Yeah,
it's the land southward. So all this orange is the land south. All of this in yellow is the land north. You see, we're not talking about like Panama, where you've got North America way above and South America way below. That's too much land to have. That's the hemispheric model. Too much. This is the limited hemispheric model, limited area. And this bountiful is where they ended up with their battles all the way up here. See this line here? They couldn't go above that. That's a continental divide. So they're over here or over here, most likely up here fighting, and they got right up here. See this line? This is the narrow pass. And this narrow pass helped with the narrow passage, where there was a whole bunch of forts even today that you can see along the Cattaraugus of Native American Indian forts. And here's that blown up, where, see on the left, the quote, it says the south side of Lake Ontario, there's a series of fortifications running from the the Erie, Cattaraugus Creek to the Pennsylvania line. 50 miles right here from Irving, New York, down to Salamanca, New York, or to Kilbuck, New York. That is the day for a Nephite, 44 miles.
Can I ask you something? Do you believe that this is kind of off topic, but but it's not off topic. Do you know how the Polynesians, if you talk to many of the older Polynesians, they say that they're Nephites.
Yeah.
That they believe that they were Hagoth, or that they were some of the boats that left. Possibly.
Right.
If that's the case, they would have came off of the United States coast.
Yes, let me show you.
Because they can't go upward from South America, right?
Right here. See where I'm showing Sea West?
Yeah.
That's Lake Michigan. That's Lake Michigan. Remember I told you about the narrow neck?
Yes.
This is a narrow neck, but so is this. And Hagoth built his boats either here and sailed the Kankakee up Lake Michigan, or he built his boats here and sailed up to Lake Michigan. And they went out the St. Lawrence Seaway east, and then they went way up north and around Canada and down through the Bering Strait into Polynesia.
Oh, wow.
Because there was...
And 50, you can do that, can't you? People sailed like that, didn't they?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you can sail that way. And, it used to be covered by water way up there in the north. So, but yeah, this is where I think that is. This one here, I talked to you about the day for a Nephite. Well, here's a day and a half for a Nephite to go from the land of Bountiful to the land of the south, or Lehi Nephi. In green is the land south, which is the Allegheny River all along here. That's south. Anything above that up here is all the land of Bountiful in the yellow, the land of Desolation in the blue. So this became a line fortified. See all these forts along here? This was a line they fortified to stop the Lamanites would try to stop the Nephites, or vice versa, either way, to come up through here. This was their sacred land where the Native Americans protected this darker yellow area where it was called their forbidden path. They didn't want people in there. This is where they hunted and fished and protected themselves. But eventually, Nephi and the Lamanites, they had to break through here. Moroni and the Lamanites, Nephites had to break through here. And so overall, if you want to see nearly surrounded by water, look at everything in green is land. Everything in blue is water. Tell me the Nephites weren't nearly surrounded by water. Anciently, this right here down Ohio River was called Lake Tight, Tight. Up here, it's called the Lake Monongahela. It's the current name of the river there in Pittsburgh. Okay, there was a whole bunch of water here and here. Over here is the Atlantic Ocean. Up here is Ontario and Lake Erie. Over here is the Great Black Swamp. Over here is the Great Kankakee Swamp. Down here is the Sea West South, which is the Mississippi, which was wider than it was in those days. And you still got the Mississippi going through here, and Wabash going through here.
Right.
So anywhere they are in here, the land Bountiful and some of Zarahemla, they were nearly surrounded by water. And that's what it means. And yet from Zarahemla up to Cumorah is north. It might be more northeast, but it's still north.
Right. That's amazing. This is so neat.
This is the only place where there was the narrow strip of wilderness that it wasn't surrounded by water. See this little gate I've made top right?
Yes.
Like if you look at there, let's say there's a gate all the way across there, but there's a little tiny opening called the small neck of land. That's the only place that anybody could get through from over here where the Lamanites are into where the Nephites were. So this little gate was a small neck of land, was an opening. This is about 4 or 5 miles wide in here is all. So the Lamanites could come sneak up in there and get through to the land close to the Nephites. So they made sure they had fortifications there, like I showed you before, along that narrow passage and the narrow passages. And the head of the river Sidon is down here in the bottom left. where the Mississippi River and the Ohio River have a confluence. It's not up where in Minnesota where the river begins. It's where the conflux means the same thing as head. Head means conflux, where they come together.
Right.
And that's an 1828 dictionary. So we know this is the conflux, which would be a very hard place for anybody to get through. This is where, all along here is where the Nephites battled the Lamanites, and they threw their bodies into the Mississippi River in here. So this is overwhelmingly cool. Okay, whether or not
overwhelmingly cool.
Yeah. So whether or not you think this is true or not, think and pray about it, study it. But I don't think. I mean, my mind's open. But I'll tell you, the last 10 years, it's been finding new stuff every single day. Okay.
Well, I mean, I like the concrete structures in Central and South America, but you would think that you would, if that was the case, and they were still standing. One thing, the Book of Mormon talks more about wood structures. They mention cement a little bit,
yeah,
but not as much. Maybe
right,
for posts, maybe for putting posts up or whatever, right? But the other thing is, also, wouldn't we have found a temple like unto Solomon's there?
Well, we could have. But
you know what I mean?
Yeah, we could, but we've also found pyramids. Pyramids, to me, and the structures of Aztecs and Incas are very similar in that they were both constructed by non-Hebrew people.
Right, and more like Egyptians, even possibly.
Yeah, well, yeah, Egyptians and Aztecs and Mayans, or Asian type people. Whereas the mounds of the United States were built, as Hugh Nibley says, they were drab. They weren't ornamented. They weren't building big castles up to their king. They were building little simple Indian mounds of earth and dirt.
You mean a sign of less vanity and more humility, and people that were calmly, like the Book of Mormon talks about, and just building their edifices to and dedicating them to the Savior,
to the Lord. That's why Native American Indian grounds are so sacred. They're sacred. They're not to be built over, but they've been plowed down and destroyed by colonialists.
Right.
But in this area, let me just share this, and I can conclude it here if you'd like. And they built a great city. This is quoting Ether 10. They built a great city. Think of Hamilton, Ontario, or Buffalo, New York. They build a great city by the narrow neck of land, by the place where the what? The sea divides the land. Does the sea east and the sea south divide this land in green?
Yes.
Okay. That is the narrow neck of land. Now, if they said in the Book of Mormon, the narrow neck of water, it would be more like this. This is a narrow neck of water and water and water. But they didn't say that. They said the narrow neck of land, not the narrow necks of water. Okay. So if you look at that carefully now, anywhere from Buffalo to Ontario could be that land. But notice, where is Ether 1020 from what people? The Jaredites.
Yes, the Jaredites.
Okay. So Ether 1020 is not even talking about the Nephites. The abridged records are talking about the Jaredites using the narrow neck of land. See how much further the narrow neck of land is above, where all of this down here happened in Cumorah and Pennsylvania and all that? See, this probably has nothing to do with the Nephites. They might have barely known it existed. They went through Buffalo, New York, but they went all up in here, and Cumorah's right in here. Okay, so that's something interesting to look at. So this is a 3 more slides of the narrow neck of land, so you can get a better idea to focus in. Okay, you see the green area, that's the narrow neck. But you see in between the green is Lake Wainfleet, which is an ancient lake. And so I think this bottom 1/5 of that narrow neck was probably more likely the narrow neck the Jaredites would use. to get back and forth here. Same thing they could have used up here, but they couldn't have gone where the red is because that was a formation, the escarpment. They had to travel on the land in green or on the water in blue. Now, let me look at that closer, see it here. But notice it's only 24 miles width. And so that little bottom strip is only 3 miles width from Lake Wainfleet to Lake Erie. That very easily, you see in the middle, the white dots, white and black dot, 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 that's the Lake Erie watershed. Meaning if water dropped on that watershed, the rivers would flow north from here and south from here. They flow north or south on this little dotted line. So that separates people. Here's the final great big picture of the Niagara area. Niagara Falls is right here. What I just showed you right here, see that yellow circle? I'm now showing you up close right here in this whole picture. Okay? And notice that there's a yellow watershed, which is called the Lake Ontario drainage. There's a blue one called the Niagara drainage, and there's a green one called the Lake Erie drainage. That means that when rivers start, like look up here in the top left where the town of Grimsby in Canada, the waters flow from up here to here and stop. Okay, so they flow that way up, going up north. The rivers here flow this way, south. Same thing here. The waters from the township of western Lincoln flow like the arrows are showing. These flow like the Lake Erie drainage flow like the green arrows.
Right.
They go over here. So those are all barriers where one river starts with the next one right to it. In between them is a drainage division or an escarpment or a continental divide. So you have to understand that to see this green area down here. Here's what's interesting. See these little symbols I've got in the green area down here at the bottom? Look what those are. Go down to the bottom. In the blue one, or I'm sorry, the yellow one, the 4 squares yellow, that's the McIntyre-Evans Archaeological number 90 multi-component site that's dated 3000 to 2000 BC right here. Would that be Nephite or Jaredite?
Well, that would be the Jaredites.
Okay, and what about this red star? Look down here. It says Meadow Heights, Genesee Camp, Port Colborne, Ontario, 2000 to 850 BC. Well, that would also be Jaredite time. And see this yellow star? That's the Canada Starch lithic scatter, which is 1650 to 1550 BC. And look at far right over here, the town of Mount Erie, this diamond, that's the multi-component site Buffalo. That's dated 1830 to 1550 BC, right there. And look at, there's one an outlier up here in orange. That's the Ravasolo lithic scatter, 3000 BC to 1650 BC. Those all really exist, and you could look them up in Google under these names down here. That, I believe, the narrow neck of land was Jaredite. It was not Nephite. But the small neck and the small neck of land were Nephite. So that's where I end this by saying I have got much more to share, including the history of why Mesoamerica believes what it does and how ours differs.
We're going to have you back, Ryan. Don't worry. We'll have you back.
Click through all that and end it with one slide, okay? Just so you know, you can get a map book of my maps at bookofmormonevidence.org at the bookstore. If you want a free map of anything you've seen, email me, and I'll give you a free PDF of that map or two at my email, which is my first and last name, spelled RIAN RyanNelson, Ryan Nelson at AOL.com. Be happy to send you some free map or two. And I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Troy, for your time. I appreciate it.
No, thank you, Ryan. I've appreciated this. This has been amazing. Okay, Ryan, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. We're going to have you back. We're going to talk about many, many things. Narrow neck of land. I think that's important. Why? I'll tell you why I think it's important. Because, and tell me if I'm wrong or right. I'm sure you're going to tell me I'm right. Because I think that for one person, let's just take Mesoamerica, to say this is all it can mean. That's all it can mean is preposterous. Because if you go back and you look at George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, many others in the past, right? And that, what do you call that, pseudo-biblical language from the 15th century to the 19th century that the Book of Mormon was written in.
Right.
Narrow neck does not necessarily mean between two bodies of oceans. It has several different meanings. So thank you so much, Ryan, for pointing that out to us.
And, I just want people to know the Mesoamerican people that believe that way are free to believe that way. And I have no animosity.
No, not at all.
I love their testimony of the Book of Mormon as I do mine. I just feel like knowing the heartland of the United States of America makes it even a stronger witness for me to know this is the promised land of the United States, where the Lord chose for us to begin the restoration. And we have a responsibility to share the message, or we'll be held more accountable than those that were not initially on the chosen land.
Absolutely. Yes. And you're right. It does matter. People go to Jerusalem. They take they go on these pilgrimages to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And why? Because they want to see where the Savior was born. They want to be in the Holy Land. And they want to see where the Bible took place. Why not see where the Book of Mormon took place?
And why not see and find the pottery in Apalachicola, Florida, dated to 550 BC, where I believe it could have been Nephi's cereal bowl.
Let's end on that. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Thank you.
You have a good one.
It's your destiny.